The sun was fierce that morning, the kind that painted everything gold and burned away shadows. The wind rolled across the empty Texas land, carrying the dry scent of dust and sagebrush. Luke Harland, a rancher by trade and loner by habit, had been out mending fence lines since dawn. His horse, Jasper, snorted softly beside him, swatting flies with its tail. Luke wiped sweat from his brow and looked toward the horizon, endless, quiet and empty. At least, he thought it was. Then came the sound, faint but sharp enough to freeze him mid-step. A woman's voice, crying. He turned, scanning the prairie. The wind carried it again, clearer this time. Please, someone. Without a second thought, Luke mounted up and rode hard toward the sound. The ground shook under Jasper's hooves, dust flying behind them as the cry grew louder. When he reached the edge of a dry creek bed, he saw her. A woman sat on the ground, half covered in torn cloth and dust. Her hair clung to her face, her hands trembling. One side of her blouse was ripped open, not indecent but enough to show she'd been struggling, maybe running. Her face lifted, eyes red and terrified. "Don't come closer," she cried, voice breaking. Luke pulled the reins, stopping a few feet away. "Ma'am, I ain't gonna hurt you," he said calmly. "You all right?" She shook her head violently, clutching a torn piece of fabric to her chest. No, I'm not." He slid off his horse slowly, keeping his hands visible. "You hurt? Need water?" Her lips trembled. I took it off." Luke froze, unsure what she meant. The words came out in a sob. "They told me to take it off, so they'd stop." He didn't speak, didn't move. His jaw clenched tight. The sunlight caught her tears as she tried to hide her face. "Please," she whispered, "don't look at me." Luke took off his hat and crouched a few steps closer, keeping his voice low and gentle. "Ain't nobody here but us. You ain't gotta be scared." She looked up then, eyes full of raw pain and shame. "You don't understand. I had no choice." Luke's chest felt heavy. "Don't gotta explain a thing," he said. "Whatever happened, it ain't on you." He pulled off his coat and offered it to her. "Here, cover up. Sun's too damn hot." For a moment she hesitated, then took it, wrapping herself tight. "Why are you helping me?" "'Cause someone should have sooner," he said simply. They stayed there a while, the silence filled with wind and grass. Slowly her breathing steadied. She stared at the ground, fingers clutching the edges of his coat. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to scare you." Luke shook his head. "Don't you be sorry for nothing. You've had enough taken from you already." She looked at him again, confusion in her eyes now instead of fear. "You talk like a man who's lost something too." He gave a small, rough laugh. "Maybe I have." The air shifted between them. For the first time, she didn't flinch when he moved closer. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ellen," she said quietly. "All right, Ellen, let's get you out of this sun. You got a place to go." She hesitated. "No, they burned it." Luke's jaw tightened. "Then you're coming with me." "They got a spare room, food, water. Nothing fancy, just safe." Her lips parted like she wanted to refuse, but she saw something in his face, something steady, something that didn't ask anything in return. She nodded. He helped her onto Jasper carefully, holding her steady as the horse started moving. The sunlight reflected off the pale dirt road, dust swirling behind them like a trail of gold. For a while they didn't speak. The silence was heavy but peaceful. "You're not like them," she said suddenly. Luke glanced over his shoulder. "Like who?" "The men who found me first," she said softly. "They said they'd help me." "Then they—" Her voice broke. Luke didn't push her to finish. His grip tightened on the reins. "They won't be bothering you again. Not while you're under my roof." She looked at him, tired eyes full of disbelief. "Why would you risk that?" He kept his gaze forward. "Because sometimes the only thing a man's got left is what he's willing to stand for." By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was high and strong. The land stretched wide. Fences, horses, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance. He helped her down from the horse and led her inside. The cool air of the cabin made her shiver slightly. "Sit," he said, nodding toward a chair. "I'll fetch water." She obeyed, still wrapped in his coat. Her eyes darted around the small cabin, clean, simple, everything in its place. When he returned, she took the cup and drank, slow, grateful. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. He shrugged. "Don't have to say nothing. You just rest." But she didn't rest. She kept watching him, like she was trying to figure him out. "You're quiet," she said after a while. "Talking never fixed much," he replied. That made her smile. Small, fragile, but real. "Maybe not, but sometimes it helps." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a second, the room felt too still. The sunlight through the window painted her face gold, and he realized how young she looked beneath all the pain. "I'll make supper," he said quickly, breaking the moment. "You'll need strength." Hours later, after a meal of stew and bread, Ellen sat by the window watching the sun dip lower in the sky. The light glowed on the horizon, warm, endless. Luke leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You should sleep." "Long day." She turned to him, eyes soft. "Luke, thank you." He nodded once. "Ain't no thanks needed." "I mean it," she said, voice trembling. "You saw me at my worst, and you didn't look away." He swallowed, his voice low. "Didn't see nothing that needed judging." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't know what that means to me." He stepped closer, slow, steady, like approaching a wild horse. "I might," he said quietly. "Maybe more than you think." The golden light washed over both of them, their shadows stretching long across the floor. And in that sunlight, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but understanding. That night, Luke sat on the porch, the stars coming out one by one. Inside, Ellen slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. He looked up at the endless sky and exhaled slowly. Whatever she had run from, whoever had hurt her, they'd come looking, he was sure of it. And when they did, he'd be ready. The next morning, sunlight poured through the cabin window in long golden beams. The air smelled of dust and coffee, and the sound of a rooster echoed across the quiet ranch. Ellen stirred under the thin blanket, blinking at the brightness. For the first time in weeks, she'd slept through the night. When she sat up, the borrowed coat slipped from her shoulders. Her skin still showed bruises, reminders of the road behind her, but under that same sunlight, they looked like they were already fading. Luke was outside, feeding the horses. His movements were calm, practiced, a man who lived by routine to keep his thoughts in check. But when he saw her standing in the doorway, barefoot, hair glowing like copper in the sun, he froze mid-step. "You should rest," he said. Breaking the silence. "I've rested enough," she replied softly. He gave a half-smile. "You sound like my stubborn mare." Ellen laughed lightly, and for the first time the sound didn't break. It was warm, human. "Maybe I'm tougher than I look." Luke tipped his hat. "Reckon you are." She stepped out into the sunlight, eyes squinting against the glare. "This land, it's beautiful," he nodded. "Harsh, too. Teaches you to take the hurt with the good." "I think I've had enough hurt," she murmured. He looked at her, the sunlight cutting across his face. "Then maybe it's time for some good." They spent the morning working in quiet rhythm. She helped gather eggs from the hens, brushed one of the calmer horses, and even tried her hand at filling the water trough. Her hands were still shaky, but Luke didn't say a word. He just watched her, steady, patient, like sunlight waiting to warm the cold earth. At noon, they sat under the oak tree by the corral. Luke passed her a tin plate of beans and bread. "You were married once?" she asked suddenly. He paused before answering. "Yeah, a long time ago." "What happened?" He stared out at the horizon, the wind stirring the tall grass. "Fever took her." "Took the baby too." Ellen's breath caught. "I'm sorry," he shrugged, eyes distant. "Ain't nothing to be sorry for." "World takes what it wants," she hesitated. "You talk like you made peace with it." "Maybe I just got tired of fighting the past." Ellen lowered her gaze. "I wish I could say the same." He looked at her carefully. "You can tell me if you want." She shook her head. "Not yet, but soon," and something in her tone told him she meant it. The day rolled on, bright and hot. The ranch shimmered under the sun like an ocean of gold. Luke went back to chopping wood while Ellen swept the porch. It was quiet until Jasper, the horse, lifted his head and snorted. Luke looked up sharply. The sound of distant hooves drifted through the air, not many but heavy. 2 or 3 riders coming fast. He dropped the axe, wiping sweat from his hands. "Ellen," he called. She froze. "What is it?" "Visitors," he said flatly. Her face went pale. "No, it's them." Luke's jaw tightened. "You sure?" She nodded, trembling. "The man with the scar. He said he'd come back." Luke's mind raced. He grabbed his rifle from the porch, checked the chamber, and stood firm. "Get inside. Lock the back door. Luke, please," he cut her off. "Ain't got time to argue. Go." The riders came fast, dust swirling around them as they approached the ranch gate. 3 men this time, as all rough, all armed. The leader had the same cruel scar cutting across his cheek. He grinned when he saw Luke standing alone by the fence. "Morning, rancher. We came for what's ours." Luke didn't blink. "Don't recall you owning anything here?" Scarface chuckled. "We own that woman you're hiding. She's worth more than you think. We were taking her to Fort Harper before she ran. You hand her over, and maybe we don't burn your place to the ground." Luke's grip on the rifle tightened. "I don't take kindly to threats." The man's grin faded. "This ain't no threat, cowboy. It's a deal." Luke took a step forward, sunlight glinting off his gun barrel. "Then here's my deal. You turn around and ride back the way you came, and I forget you ever dirtied my land." For a moment, silence. The wind whistled across the plains, stirring the dust between them. Then the outlaw laughed. "Big words from a man standing alone." Luke's voice dropped low. "I ain't alone." Behind him, Ellen stood on the porch, holding his old revolver with both hands. She was trembling, but her aim was steady. Scarface sneered. "You think she'll shoot?" "She's scared out of her mind." Luke didn't move his eyes from the men. "You don't know her like I do?" Ellen's voice cut through the air, soft but sharp. "Leave, or I swear I'll make sure you never come back." The men looked at each other, uncertain. Scarface spat in the dirt. "You both just signed your graves." He kicked his horse, but before he could raise his weapon, Luke fired. The shot echoed across the plains, sending birds scattering into the blue sky. Dust exploded near Scarface's boots, close enough to make his horse rear and throw him off. Ellen's shot came next, wild, but close. The second man ducked, cursing, and grabbed his reins. "Let's go!" Scarface shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Ain't worth it." The men turned and rode off, vanishing into the heat haze. Silence again. Just the wind and the steady beat of Luke's heart. He turned, lowering his rifle. Ellen was still standing there, her hand shaking, the gun heavy in her grip. He walked up slowly, took it from her, and set it aside. "You did good," he said quietly. Her lip trembled. I was so scared," he nodded. "That's how you know you're still alive." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "I thought they'd kill you." He gave a half smile. "Would have made 'em work for it." She let out a shaky laugh, then suddenly threw her arms around him. He froze, again, but only for a second. Then his arms went around her, strong and certain. The sunlight wrapped around them both, golden and real. "You're safe now," he murmured. "No," she whispered against his chest. "Not yet. You don't understand who they work for." He pulled back, frowning. "Then tell me." Her eyes met his, full of fear and something deeper. "It wasn't just those men. They were hired by a man in town." "The sheriff." Luke's face went still. "Sheriff Colt?" She nodded slowly. "He's not what people think. He runs everything. The trade routes, the brothels, the debt lines. I saw something I wasn't supposed to. That's why they wanted me dead." Luke's eyes darkened, his jaw hard. "Then he's made himself an enemy." Ellen grabbed his arm. "No, Luke, please. He'll kill you too." He looked toward the horizon, sunlight reflecting off his rifle barrel. "Then I reckon it's time someone stood up to him." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Luke saddled Jasper again. The light painted his face gold, his eyes burning like steel. Ellen watched from the porch, tears glistening. "You can't do this alone," he looked back at her. "Wasn't planning to. You said you wanted to stop running, right?" She hesitated, then nodded. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a small revolver, and placed it in her hand. Then we ride together. The wind picked up, rustling the grass around them. The golden light grew softer, wrapping both of them in a warm glow. Two broken souls, ready to face whatever darkness the daylight still held.